Ay, kumusta po kayo dyan sa Manila? We're here in Warsaw, Poland. This is our last stop of our short trip here in Europe. In a few minutes, we're going to the airport na. We decided to drop by here in Warsaw para makita man lang kahit paano itong lugar, no? The capital of Poland. Nandito tayo sa Castle Square. But we also took this opportunity, this brief stop to speak with a former student of mine. He and his wife, they had to move from Ukraine to Warsaw in Poland as a result of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So kinausap po natin siya. Ito po yung ating interview.
No lies, no distortions, just the facts and the truth about issues that matter. Facts First with Christian Esqueda.
Kasama po natin ngayon si Mr. Janardan Duran who is based now in Warsaw, Poland. Nandito tayo ngayon sa isang coffee shop sa Warsaw. He is a former student of mine sa University of Santo Tomas and he and his wife are currently based in Warsaw. Pag-uusapan natin yung kanyang interesting na experience as someone who lived in Ukraine and then decided to move with his wife here in Warsaw, Poland.
Good morning, sir.
Formal mo huwag mo na ako sir. Janardan, how long have you been here sa Warsaw, Poland?
So we moved since March 6 of this year. Nandito na kami sa Warsaw naka-base. We were living in Lviv, Ukraine. And then the war happened, yung invasion. And after a few days, we were able to find a way to escape or to go to safety. We got on a bus that went from Lviv, Ukraine to Warsaw, Poland.
What was the situation in Lviv nung at that time bago kayo umalis?
It was early morning when the war started. We heard I think it was artillery fire in the morning. Yung wife ko was on the way to her work sa dance studio and then she heard we both heard the parang artillery yata yun or missile. It was like happening like maybe 100 kilometers away. And then yan bumalik nga siya sa apartment and then we saw the news na nga. We started getting calls from my in-laws, from our friends. What we feared actually happened. So
This was in February, no? Kasi yung first attack ni Putin, no?
23, yeah.
Kayo, when did you move to Lviv?
My wife and I, we got married sa Manila almost 3 years ago. Nakatira kami doon through COVID, through the pandemic. And then nauna yung wife ko last year nung May. So she was in Lviv for several months. Tapos nakahabol ako finally nung January.
This year?
This year lang. Wala pang isang buwan, nag-invade na yung Russia.
How was it like sa Lviv when you were there before the Russian invasion?
It's a great city, very cultural. So masaya dun sa city. Although syempre once in a while napag-uusapan na nga yung magi-invade nga ba yung Russia or hindi. So amongst our friends na Ukrainians tsaka mga fellow expats, pinag-uusapan namin yun. Actually a week before the invasion, nakakuha na kami ng sort of an insider tip na it actually might happen. So somebody from the government told us na before parang 50-50, ngayon parang more than that. Na within this week, magi-invade na.
What was going through your mind then? Yung para bang kakarating mo lang tapos ito yung threat ng war and it was very real, di ba?
Hindi ko alam kung in denial or just actually it's hard to describe yung thought process. But I immediately started to actually prepare, like contacting the Philippine Embassy. Kasi actually yung embassy na nag-handle sa Ukraine, sa Warsaw, yung Philippine Embassy. May honorary consul lang sa Kiev. So I got in touch with them before the invasion and in the first few days nga. In constant contact nga. Our original plan was, if it does get worse, we would go to Warsaw and then fly back to Manila. That was the original plan.
Pero in the first place, yung pag-move mo sa Lviv, that was for good. Doon na kayo dapat magsasettle.
Yeah, that was for good. Actually, yung first month ko doon, we were already processing yung residence permit ko. Yun yung that whole plan. Pero as we got closer, yun nga yung nakatunog na kami na baka nga mag-invade na. We decided not to continue, and I just held on to my passport.
At that time, may work ka na ba sa Lviv?
Wala pa. So most of my work was still is remote or online.
Oh. So, nung nangyari yung invasion itself, ang initial plan nyo dapat, parang transit point yung Warsaw, going back to Manila.
Yes. That was the...
Pero what happened? Bakit Are you staying here in Warsaw for good?
For me now, it's hard to say what is for good. Kasi the plan was to live in Ukraine for good. So it's still kind of like looking at the situation. Kasi it's still, the war is still going on, which I think, unfortunately, a lot of people I think are starting to forget that it's actually still happening. So, and yun din yung sentiment kasi dito sa Poland when you talk to the Polish, yung fear then na, they're the next door neighbor. And yung history din kasi ng Poland with Russia. So,
and with Ukraine.
So it's like meron din silang kanya-kanyang mga plans in case this war escalates or spills over to their country. So for me, for now it's like start staying here for now, looking at looking at the opportunities here. Maybe to get residency, to find work here.
Kumusta yung travel niyo from Lviv going to Warsaw?
We were looking at several ways, by train, by bus, or renting a car. Yung renting a car would be the most expensive way. We finally found like a bus na directly from Lviv to Warsaw. The reason then we chose Warsaw was nagkataon din na meron akong pinsan living in Warsaw, married to a Polish. So we finally got the bus, and interestingly it was coming from my in-laws' hometown, which is right outside the city. So we got on the bus, and then actually my brother-in-law paid for it. So we got to the border, haba ng pila. We were actually there for I think mga 8 hours at the Ukrainian-Polish border. Actually, ang matagal was like inuna kasi ng border control yung mga on foot. Kasi meron ding mga hinatid ng sasakyan, ng kotse for example, tapos naglakad na lang sila. So kasi remember that this happened winter pa nun, or end of winter. Sobrang lamig pa nun. So inuna nila yung mga wala sa sasakyan. So inuna muna yon, and then isa-isa kaming mga bus and yung mga nakakotse. Mga late night na kami dumating, and then pass na kami siguro mga 4 a.m. While waiting there, yung setup doon is maraming mga volunteer organizations and individuals na nag-setup ng mga pagkain, medicine, mga essentials, water, and then may mga barrels then where we could na may fire, so that we could stay warm. Mga heater na nag-burn sila so we could keep warm. Cooked food actually. While we waited for our turn. So we got to the first yung Ukrainian border guards. Mabilis lang yon. And then meron din from the Ukrainian military, especially check kaming mga lalaki, checked our passports kasi nga by that time bawal na lumabas yung mga Ukrainian men or Ukrainian citizens. So buti na lang Philippine passport pa ako noon. So
otherwise it would have been conscripted, no?
Yes, otherwise yeah. In fact, yeah, I've met people who tried to leave but couldn't. Yeah, ang daming cases na ganun.
Pero dito, kasi I understand, di ba, marami sa mga Polish open their doors, sa mga Poles, open their households, no?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
For the refugees.
To complete strangers.
Oo. Kayo, ano yung nag-experience nyo when you got here?
We got lucky nga kasi may pinsan ako. Yung pinsan ko welcomed us into her home. Nakatira kami dun sa room ng pamangkin ko, ng niece ko. She gave up her room for us for like a couple months when we were here. And then it's for our friends naman din, mga other Ukrainians, complete strangers would just volunteer and open up their homes. So doon din sila nakatira for a few months. And then yung iba naman nakahanap ng mga for rent na studio or apartment. But mostly of course my friends are women and children.
So far, how do you get by dito sa Warsaw?
Thankfully, like my work is still remote. Like some marketing and social media stuff is online. So kahit saan naman nagagawa ko. Then I'm trying to set up so I can teach Qigong here in Warsaw. It's like Chinese yoga. And then my wife, when early on kasi pumunta kami sa UNHCR, which is the refugee agency ng UN, to get some financial help. And then my wife just asked that, do you guys need help? And then dahil nga nag-English din siya, and then she spoke Ukrainian and Russian, na-hire siya agad. So she's been working there helping fellow refugees get financial assistance.
Nakikita ko rin sa mga news dito yung parang they're also tackling the issue of parang crisis fatigue. Okay, yung enthusiasm daw medyo nawawala na.
Yeah.
O nababawasan. Kasi ang tagal na rin, di ba? So mga around 5 months na since the invasion.
Yeah.
So do you also get that feeling na as someone who actually moved from Lviv going here to Warsaw, para bang nababawasan yung focus and enthusiasm doon sa refugee problem?
Yeah, I think so. It's like may, in a sense, parang burned out na rin yung Polish. Kasi nga, actually, prior to this naman, prior to the war, they were actually Polish individuals were already trying to help Ukrainians. And also, if most of people aren't aware as well, yung Belarus also has an issue. So marami ring umaalis ng Belarus because they do not want to stay under the regime of Lukashenko. So
Nabata ni Putin po.
and then actually yun nga, some of the Russian forces are actually coming from Belarus. That's
Parang
why
naging staging area siya.
yes, exactly. What happened actually was yung regular citizens chose to help on their own initiative. And then the government actually followed suit. They followed the lead in a sense ng individuals. So even the Polish government their parliaments made a special law to support Ukrainian refugees and their spouses regardless of their nationality. So that includes me, thankfully. Pero ngayon, like for example, dati libre yung for the first few months, libre yung transportation for Ukrainians anywhere in Poland. Train, bus, tram, trolley. And then, ngayon hindi na siya free. And then, also yung monetary support is going down for some agencies, some NGOs. And then individually rin, yun, medyo, I guess, sabihin na natin pagod na rin yung mga Polish citizens kasi hindi naman din, mahirap na mga din,
You're talking here of around 3 million refugees, no? So,
yeah.
napakahirap na, especially for ilang population, nasa 38 million yata ang Poland.
I think so, yeah. And then, yeah, of course, marami rin din naman nag-move on to other countries further to the west. I actually have Ukrainian friends who've moved to places as far as Australia, at least for now. But some really want to stay sa Poland kasi nga it's near their loved ones. So many of my friends then are not with their husbands because the Ukrainian men cannot leave the country. If we speak to the Polish, like sila siguro yung pinaka nakaka-empathize sa plight ng Ukrainians, I would say, because of their history, because of their experience nga with Russia. Sabi nga nung iba sa akin, like mga Polish, like we want to be there for the Ukrainians, because we don't want them to experience the same during World War II.
Ano yung thought process mo na, for example, back home ang problema iba, di ba? Gutom, siguro human rights issues. Ikaw naman, you're a Filipino far away from your homeland. You're caught in this perhaps even much bigger problem, no?
Yeah.
Kumbaga, naipit ka talaga sa gera eh. Not long ago, you were in Manila. You had this, you married your wife, di ba? And then, you moved to Ukraine, and then biglang ganito yung nangyari.
Yeah. Yung initial month ko doon was like fairy tale like kasi parang Lviv in Ukraine is I think one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And kami doon, punta sa cafe, meet with friends, mag ice skating sa labas. ganun yung ano namin, yung routine namin, yung buhay namin doon. And then suddenly it's like, you know, wala. We still have a lot of friends actually there. Pero of course, they still have those air raid sirens every day.
Hanggang ngayon.
Hanggang ngayon, yeah.
Hindi ba nag-dissipate yung parang threat ng Russian invasion doon sa mismo Lviv? Kasi, di ba ngayon, nagko-concentrate sila sa Donbas region tapos pababa?
Yeah. Yeah, pero occasionally they would still attack they would fire upon Lviv Oblast or the region of Lviv. Especially if kunwari may visit from a diplomat or from somebody or some humanitarians. In fact, several celebrities have already visited, if not Kiev, at least Lviv. So occasionally they would fire upon Western Ukraine. Nagpaparamdam para hindi rin kasi people are trying to try to go back to bring back some sense of normalcy. Except yun nga, may curfew pa rin and may air raid sirens pa rin. Kasi yung air raid sirens would play regardless of where the missile attack. As long as it's going to fire upon within Ukraine territory, yung air raid siren will go for the entire, kasi di din nila alam
kung saan tatama
necessarily, yeah. And usually, the attacks would come from several places, even
parang
from the
wala kang peace of mind in short.
Walang peace of mind,
diba?
Yeah, I remember that yung first few days namin, we would go to the air raid siren with alarm, and actually the rule was we had 10 minutes to get to shelter. So most of apartment buildings naman would have basements. So we would go to the basement and wait for the second alarm before we could all go back to our apartments or go about our day. We went to our in-laws outside the city to stay there for the first few days when the war started, when the invasion started. And then we were setting up yung basement din kung saan yung in-laws ko nagsistay. We were setting up the basement, yung electricity, water, food supply, and then make mga beddings so that yun nga, in case nga pwedeng magstay doon. So we were able to use that in the first few days we were staying there. We would go there. Unfortunately, since it's in a town, walang actual air raid siren na umaabot doon. So we would rely on the radio or somebody would call. And then our TV would be on 24 hours in the first few days kasi nga we needed to monitor the situation as it was unfolding. My wife's also a dance teacher and yoga teacher. Tapos dun sa dance studio, yung owner decided to turn it into like a shelter. So some refugees from Kiev and from the east were actually staying in the dance studio. We were helping a little bit. And then we met a couple there from Kiev. And then since we were leaving that apartment we were just renting, parang pinasa namin yung apartment sa kanila. So some of our stuff is still there. And then sila na yung nagsistay doon since we left.
Yung mga curious naman pala, parang kasi very unusual siguro sa iba yung a Filipino getting married to a Ukrainian. How did you meet your wife?
We met online through a mutual friend. Tapos we started communicating online, and then eventually we met in person. Online was 2018, end of 2018, and then nag-meet kami in person sa Kuala Lumpur when she was working in India, and then ako from the Philippines. Naghanap kami ng bansa na visa-free
mutual
for both of us. So nakita kami sa Malaysia in January of 2019.
Oh.
Yeah. And then from there I also a few months later I visited her and met her parents sa Ukraine. It was my first time sa Ukraine. And then kasama ko na rin siya pabalik ng Manila, and then we got married months later, end of 2019.
Bilis yun, ha?
Yeah, we got married.
Ang bilis ng true love mo, ha? So kayo na ba ng online or hindi pa?
Parang ganon.
Parang ganon na, MU na.
Yeah.
So 2019 you got married?
Yeah, 2019.
In
Manila, in
Manila.
Quezon City.
Quezon City.
Tapos we've been living in Quezon City throughout the pandemic, which is also traumatic for her actually.
Oo, kasi one of the strictest lockdown siya sa atin eh.
Yeah.
Oo.
And one of the longest then.
Oo.
So just imagine like for a foreigner nga na dun lang siya sa bahay, hindi siya makalabas. Kasi it's kind of weird na you couldn't even go out to exercise or to go to the park. Even the parks were closed, di ba? So after that, trinay naman namin, sige, try natin Ukraine. Let's try your country. Kaso,
Ito naman.
yung
So
sitwasyon.
from one challenging situation to another. So kaya nasabi mo parang it's very hard to say kung ano yung for good for now, no? Kasi matindi yung yung uncertainty.
Yeah.
Pero dito, kasi 'di ba kaya na you touch upon this earlier na yung para bang explain mo nga sa amin yung situation na yung Ukrainians are given equal rights in Poland, tapos yung Polish and this are Ukraine, and are you actually benefiting from that?
Yeah, so yung like special law, no? So yung government dito made a special law to support yung mga Ukrainian refugees, at least those who came or living now in Poland because of the war. Regardless kung nanggaling ka doon or pabalik ka ng Ukraine during the war, they allow Ukrainian citizens to stay here for 18 months without needing for additional paperwork. Tapos meron ding pwede rin mag-work to get health insurance, to even open a business here in Poland. And also possibility of getting a residency permit later on. Pinadali nila for Ukrainians. And thankfully that included yung spouses regardless nga ng nationality. So that includes me.
If you would have your way, ano ba? Are you willing to stay here or better to go back in Manila or better to stay here?
To be frank, because of the recent change in administration, I would prefer to stay here.
Grabe naman, bakit naman ganun? Sa mahal na Pangulong Bongbong Marcos?
Yeah. Well,
Tatawa. Hindi ko akalain mapupunta sa...
parang unavoidable.
You would rather stay?
I would rather stay here. Kasi, yeah, it's... Siyempre nakakamiss din yung family and friends back in the Philippines. Pero I'm also reading about and hearing about yung challenges then right now sa Philippines. I mean, with the inflation and the political climate, yung human rights. So I think I'd rather take my chances here for now. See what I can do. It's really wait and see then. We don't know kasi what will happen. The war is still on then, and we'll just have to see.
Okay, so yan po. Nadinig po natin yung kwento ni Janardan Duran or Jan here in Poland. Maraming salamat sa iyo. Thank you for sharing your story, and we'll pray for you kasi nga hindi madali yung situation mo. So Jan, salamat sa iyo.
No blind.
You're welcome. Thank you rin.
Distortions. Just the facts and the truth about issues that matter. Facts First with Christian Esqueda.